Morning.
Good morning to all of you, and thank you for giving up your Saturday morning to come to our United Left celebration of International Women's Day. This is actually the third in our United Left series of meetings under the umbrella of Winning the Future. The meetings are part of a consultation process we're having with United Left members and close contacts to draw up a United Left political and industrial program for these unprecedented times. To help organise our discussions, we've drawn up a United Left Charter for Women, which we'll post in the chat now, so you can have a look at it, and we'll explain it to you during the course of the morning. Today's meeting is a celebration of women's activism and our demand.
Oh, Bronwyn, you've just silenced yourself.
Oops, I'm not on mute.
Don't think I, well, anyway, it wasn't me. So I got up to today's meeting is a celebration of women's activism and our demand for inclusion in our rightful place as part of a strong collective leadership for Unite. Our union has played a key and progressive role in the dramatic events which continue to unfold in the UK and internationally, exposing at every point the stark inequalities which we in the trade unions have always known about, but which have now reached an unbearable pitch. The Tory government announcement of a 1% pay increase for the predominantly female workforce in the NHS shows that it's absolutely business as usual for them. We all know that a Unite leadership contest is coming down the line. So now is the time we need to consider carefully what kind of leadership our union needs. We think that one of the major contributions the struggle for women's equality has given us is the concept of a collective leadership. What Unite must have is not the one great man or great woman at the top who tells everybody below what to do, but a leadership structure that extends from top to bottom of our union, from the reps to the EC members, with all the equality strands fully represented, and which tells our top leaders what to do. In other words, the union has to be structured to be a truly and above all absolutely equal lay-led union. We think this is a far more powerful way of organising as a collective and from the bottom up, and never from the top down as a single egotistical individual only interested in their own importance. Today, we've invited a powerful panel of strong women political and industrial activists to speak to us about the role of women activists in our collective leadership. We also welcome here our United Left candidate for General Secretary, Steve Turner. He's here to listen to our panel and to our Charter for Women that we've drawn up, and to take on board all the concerns and demands that we have as women in Unite. Our first speaker is Kate Osborne, MP. Kate's a long-standing member of our United Left. She's a Labour MP for Jarrow. She's in the campaign group of MPs and a member of the Women and Equality Select Committee, which holds government to account on equality, law and policy. She's going to give us an overview of International Women's Day and some of her story. Over to you, Kate.
Well, thanks very much, Bronwyn, and hi to everybody, and thanks so much for inviting me. It's always a really big pleasure to be with my Unite family, particularly my sisters, as we look to celebrate International Women's Day. First of all, Bronwyn's obviously touched on a bit of my background. For those who don't know me, I started off as a site rep in Royal Mail over 20 years ago, and then through time became a regional and national rep. I've served on numerous committees, including the regional committee in the North East Yorkshire and the Humber region where I live, and the political committee, of which I'm still a member, and also, of course, the equality committees and the Unite National Executive. And over many years, Unite offered me lots of opportunities, and I often say that my education has been through Unite, not through the more formal ways of learning, which I was fortunate enough to access along the way, but through my activism. And in 2019, I had the opportunity to stand for Labour in the Jarrow constituency, and here I am now, but very much a Unite member and an activist still. So enough about me. I'd like to say a few words about International Women's Day, where it came from, what it means to me, and a little bit about my work in Parliament. So International Women's Day is a real celebration. It provides us an opportunity to reflect on how far we've come, but of course also how far we still need to go. And it's fantastic to see the United Left Women's Charter. Absolutely very much needed and very, very welcome indeed. The cause of equality and women's rights has come a long way since the first International Women's Day, which was back in 1911, at a time when women were largely considered the property of men and our rights were very limited. International Women's Day was first organised by an international socialist women's conference, and these pioneering women dared to dream of a world beyond oppression and indignity, of a world where men and women could stand as equals. And as we all know, it took years of struggle and sacrifice by women to win the right to vote. And they fought tirelessly, they campaigned, they marched, they petitioned and they lobbied Parliament, and some even lost their lives. And yet still some men believe that women shouldn't be allowed to vote. And the suffragettes took desperate measures. They smashed windows in West End shops, they burned down buildings, they went on hunger strikes, all to get the women the vote. And now when I walk through the corridors of Westminster into the House of Commons chamber, I often think of those women and what they did. And would we be so brave? Would we risk everything for a cause, a democratic right to vote? Could we do what the suffragettes did? And I suppose my point in all this is that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we owe everything to the people who went before us, who were pioneers and who stood up to oppression. And I'm proud that the Labour Party now has more women MPs than all of the other political parties put together. I'm proud of our action to tackle the underrepresentation of women in Parliament. That's not to say that the job is done, of course it isn't. But it's not just what we have won that we should be celebrating, it's the contribution that we've made. And women are achieving great things in every field, in the worlds of business and enterprise, in the world of politics, in the world of sport and culture. There are many exceptional women who inspire us. Certainly there's many that inspire me. And they demonstrate that everyone has talents, and given the chance, everyone can use those talents and fulfill their potential. I mean, I never ever dreamt that I would be where I am now. However, we're not completely there. There are still unseen barriers that women struggle to overcome. And never has this been more apparent than during the pandemic, where women have disproportionately suffered. Women account for just 34% of parliamentarians, so there's so much more to do until Parliament accurately reflects the society that it represents and serves. As Bronwyn touched on, I sit on the Women and Equalities Select Committee. I'm very proud to do that. Equalities has always been very important and continues to be very important to me. It's, for those of you who don't know, it's a cross-party committee of MPs appointed to scrutinise the government on equalities. And last month, our inquiry found that the government has repeatedly ignored the specific needs of women in its policy responses to the pandemic. The report highlighted the government support schemes such as the Job Retention Scheme and the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, and how they overlooked the existing inequalities women face in the labour market, how women have taken on the majority of homeschooling and childcare, regardless of whether or not they're working or not. And the report also highlighted how the government's priorities for recovery were heavily gendered in nature, with investment schemes to help the economy in the wake of the COVID crisis skewing towards industries which are heavily dominated by men. And it's been long clear that more must be done to tackle gender inequalities in representation and career progression in male-dominated sectors. So now it's even more essential that the government act on the findings of this report so that women do not lose out in the recovery. And the WC, the Women Inequalities Report, made several practical recommendations to enable this, such as the creation of government-funded training schemes specifically aimed at women around certain sectors. Our fight in Labour was actually in the recommendation in terms of maintaining the £20 uplift in universal credit, and training schemes like restart programmes, Kickstart, specifically aimed towards women. So these are all recommendations that the government must take seriously. And when we know that women are overrepresented in industries worst hit by lockdown measures, such as retail, hospitality, the arts, beauty sector, many of the women working in these industries have been forgotten, and many have or will lose their jobs, unfortunately, in the months to come. It's been the case that retail and hospitality, beauty salons and hairdressing, which predominantly employ or have women in them, were the first to close because of the virus, and actually will be the last to open. And these seemingly forgotten industries significantly contribute to the economy, especially in the Jarrow constituency that I represent up here in the northeast. And there's also an obvious intersectional element to this too, because if you're a Black minority ethnic woman or a disabled woman, then you are most likely to work in low-paid jobs or work in sectors that have been shut down. Since the report was published, I've heard the government ministers are looking at it in the rounds, which suggests to me that they're probably not looking at it at all. And this week's budget mentioned nothing for women, and this sort of lip service to such a report is just not good enough, and the government must start actively analysing the equality impact of every policy and bring women into the top table to shape these policies. The 20 recommendations laid out in the report are an opportunity for change. Taken seriously and practically applied, they will go a long way towards tackling these long-standing problems and creating a more equal future that we as socialists obviously want to see. To end on a more positive note, this weekend marks my second International Women's Day as a Member of Parliament, and I'm immensely proud to be the first woman MP for the historic Jarrow constituency since the great Red Ellen Wilkinson. To be the first woman MP for Jarrow since Ellen fills me with enormous pride, and I pay tribute to her as we celebrate International Women's Day. Ellen, like the people of the Jarrow constituency, was resilient. She was proud to represent her community and demonstrate working class solidarity. And Ellen was outraged by injustice and sought to do the right thing. As a young trade unionist, Ellen helped organise the suffragette pilgrimage in 1913, where more than 50,000 women marched to a mass rally in Hyde Park. And as the MP of Jarrow, Ellen played a key role in organising the historic 1936 Jarrow Crusade, an iconic protest against the unemployment and poverty in Tyneside. Ellen, along with 200 brave marchers who made the long trek to London from Christchurch in Jarrow, would recognise many of today's government failings around such thing as low pay, job insecurity and benefit cuts. And we've come a long way, and we should never forget and never not celebrate it. The struggle and the courage of women such as the suffragettes and Ellen paved the way for so many of us, and I'm deeply grateful to them. It's up to us to challenge and call out gender bias and inequality. We need to celebrate women's achievements, and we can influence change, and we can make it happen. From challenge comes change. And so in the spirit of this year's International Women's Day theme, let's all choose to challenge. And I'll end it there. Happy International Women's Day for Monday. Solidarity. Thank you again so much for inviting me. And I'll hand back over to Bronwyn. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks very much, Kate, for that very extensive overview. And I thought the outline of the report that you gave from the committee was very interesting in the way that it showed the institutionalized sexism that we face as women every single day. And I think, and you also spoke about how COVID has just thrown into such sharp relief what a creaking society that we live in, which is just rotten with ancient prejudices that is holding all of us back. Not just women, not just BAM, disabled, LGBT, and so forth, old and young. It's holding the whole of society back. These stinking, rotten, old, ancient prejudices that it is time that we threw out. Thanks, Kate. And I know you might have to go a little bit early because you're going to get your liberating vaccine.
Get it, everybody. Please get your jab.
Ray.
I'm going to stay on for a while. Thanks, Bronwyn.
Okay, thanks, Kate. So our second speaker is Jayne Taylor, who, as Vice Chair of Unite, holds the second highest lay position in our union, alongside another United Left member, Susan Matthews. She's been on our EC since the formation of Unite and is also on the Labour Party NEC. Over to you, Jayne.
Thanks, Bronwyn, and thanks, Kate. It's lovely to see you. Kate and I are great pals. I think she was my partner in crime on the executive, and even though I think she's doing wonderful things in Parliament, I really do miss seeing her. So that's been lovely for me today. As Bronwyn says, United Left, we've got a really good record of equalities. Myself and Susan Matthews, we're the vice chairs of the executive, but you look at our champions, our BAEM, we had Mohammed Taj and now Susan, and the LGBT, we had Harry McAnulty, and then we've got Jen Douglas with women, Jane Stewart, and the disabled members. We had, our dear brother Sean McGovern, and now Dave Allen. So, we've got a great history, United Left, of equality and filling equality seats. That's something we should be really, really proud of. But myself, I'm thinking of, we're looking for a new general secretary. Steve's there, and, I hope he's taking notes. I'm thinking, what do I want going forward? How do I see us moving forward on equalities? And what comes to mind is I think we've got to review the United equality structures. Totally. We know we're good. I've been to conferences in America and Canada, where we're taken to the top table, and Unite, we're shown as a beacon of good practice for equalities, but that doesn't mean that we can't get better. That doesn't mean that what we've been doing for years and years can't be done differently. We're in exceptional times, things have changed. We need to be looking to make sure that not just women, but anybody from our equality structures is able to have full participation in the union going forward. what I think that we need to do is undertake an equalities impact assessment to see what barriers exist and offer solutions that will increase diverse participation. I mean, look at particular sectors, for example, if you look at our hospitality sector, you know, 0 hours contracts, bad working practices, and often no union agreements. So if they've got no union agreements, they can't, through the normal procedures, elect their reps that are going to sit on committees, their reps that are going to be able to go out there. We need to look at how we can engage with those people. We, you know, at the moment, there's barriers, and these are the people in these really, really bad jobs that need us the most. So that's one thing that I think that we should be looking at. So also another thing that I'm really, really passionate about is mentoring sisters in the workplace, on committees, in the union as a whole. I mean, we have young women, young men that come forward, you know, that they want to be shop steward, but they're not sure. It's quite, you know, what happens when you're in the first meeting and you're representing somebody who could lose their job. That's like so scary, because you feel like that weight is on you. And I think it's really important that we reach out to other people and say, look, we're here, we've done it, you know, let's go through your paperwork. How can I help you? I can be at the end of a phone if you need to take a break. I want to encourage you to do that, because Steve, it is about confidence. It's about confidence, you know, not that we can't do it. It's just we continually put ourselves down, and, you know, if somebody's fate's in your hand, that's a really, really scary thing. So that's something I've always prided myself on doing. I like to bring people on, and I've encouraged people to go on, and young members as well. I mean, how difficult is it? I can remember when I wanted to become active in my branch all those years ago, they patted me on the head and told me, hey, nice one, Jayne, you can be a qualities officer and you can go to the welcome meetings. I then went to our women's school and was basically told, you know, it doesn't have to be like that. I went back to the workplace. I'm like, no, I want to be branch secretary. And they're like, well, no, you don't really, Jayne. I'm like, yeah, I do. I want to be branch secretary. I said, Diana Holland says you've got to have an election. Oh my God, that just caused a bit of a ruckus. But you know, we've got to push ourselves. You know, no matter what people say, women aren't accepted. It is more difficult for us to get on in the union than men. But I think our union is a lot better than other unions. But I do think that we can get better. And when Steve is elected General Secretary, I'm really looking for him to look at these things, and I'm sure that he will. You know, normally we'd all be coming together now for a cup of tea or a tipple and talking about experiences. I mean, in my workplace, we bake a cake for International Women's Day, and we sell off slices, and we give that to the women's refuges, which has always gone down really well. So, you know, perhaps you can ask your branches to be donating to women's charities, maybe to celebrate International Women's Day. You know, there's many people out there that need it. And lastly, can I just say how excited I am about this United Left Charter for Women that Bronwyn's going to introduce. I think it's long overdue, and I'm really proud that it's the United Left that's doing it. You know, I'm really proud to be the vice chair of your union. I actually got to chair the executive for the first time this week. Unfortunately, our chair was ill, and that was quite daunting, chairing a meeting with 80 people by Zoom. However, you know, like all things, there's barriers and we overcome them. We might have gone a little bit over time, but hey guys, we got there in the end, we really did. So thanks for inviting me. I've loved speaking to you guys today. It's been absolutely wonderful, and I'll pass it back to Bronwyn. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jayne. And thanks very much for addressing two of the big demands that we've got in our Women's Charter and explaining them so well for us in advance of our section on the agenda, where I'll be going through the all the list of demands, but you've already dealt with two of them very thoroughly and very comprehensively. Which is the first one of which is the development of a new generation of women activists being nurtured and mentored through our network of United Left women, and also an equalities impact assessment of all our Unite structures so that we can ensure that they are completely open to women who want to get involved in our union's activities. So thanks for that, Jayne. And our next speaker is Donna Guthrie, who is a Unite BAEM woman activist and the National Women's Officer for Black activists rising against cuts. Donna's got a very long history of anti-racist campaigning and organising, in particular against the BNP, and is actively engaged in her regional and national industrial committees and regional BAM committees. So welcome, Donna. And I've also worked with Donna over a period of years now on various activities and on our sectoral committee together. And I know she's a great organiser and a great fighter in terms of all aspects of equalities. So Donna, over to you.
Thank you, Bronwyn. So yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak today at International Women's Day rally for United Left. As National Women's Officer for BARAC-UK, as Bronwyn's mentioned, I campaign to highlight the impact of austerity on Black communities and Black women in particular in the anti-cuts movement. It's really important that we're intersectional in our campaigns and struggles. BARAC was founded in 2010 in response to Tories' austerity attacks and seeks to encourage and support the engagement of Black activists across the country to challenge the government's attacks and cuts on our services and our welfare and incomes, and also to tackle and challenge racism as it perpetuates. In the first Windrush Day that took place in 2019, 22nd of June, BARAC and BAEM Lawyers for Justice organised the Windrush Day of Action across the country to highlight the continued injustice suffered by the Windrush generations and their descendants. I was the lead organiser for the London rally on that day, London Action, and we organised, in fact, we organised in the London and Eastern Unite office, along with students, communities affected, trade union activists, and on the day we marched from Downing Street with our protest banners that we'd made in the Unite office, massive banner, and we marched from Downing Street to Westminster Bridge, blocking the road for several hours and making our voices heard, with people affected, dropping a huge banner across the bridge. We achieved media coverage to highlight the continued injustice faced by those impacted by the hostile environment. Now, many of you know that the hostile environment has continued. The government, despite announcing that it's got a Windrush compensation scheme, hasn't given justice even to people impacted by the Windrush, and we've still got people in detention centres. Just last November, I was involved with others in the campaign against the deportation flight that took place to Jamaica on the 2nd of December. In the middle of a worldwide COVID-19 pandemic that is disproportionately impacting and killing Black people, this Tory government carried out this racist and inhumane deportation. BARAC-UK, along with BAEM Lawyers for Justice, Detention Action, and other race equality and migrant rights groups, worked tirelessly to build the campaign to stop the plane and to highlight the plight of #Jamaica50. Black activists led this campaign, involving students, anti-racist activists, Black celebrities and public figures, lawyers, barristers, multiple MPs, to demand the cancellation of the deportation flight. Over 185,000 people signed our petition, the BARAC-UK's online petition, and also wrote to their MPs. Many put pressures on the airlines involved as well, and also on the pilot union BALPA to refuse to fly the deportation flight. More than 90 high-profile figures, campaigners, activists urged airline companies to decline to operate the plane. People like model Naomi Campbell, actress Sandy Newton, book author Bernardine Evaristo, and historian David Olusogo joined with other figures to sign an open letter to the government, and also addressing the airlines concerned for them to stop the operation of further deportation flights to the Commonwealth countries. Lawyers worked tirelessly to gather details of cases and activists as well. and assist with people with urgent legal challenges that brought justice to some people right up until the plane left Stansted in the early hours of that Wednesday morning. And I want to thank all those that showed solidarity and took action to oppose that flight. Together, we stopped 37 people being deported, but the children of 13 taken are heartbroken. We see with this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, that it's exposed inequalities and has disproportionately impacted on women, with young, disabled and Black women facing multiple impacts. As has been highlighted already, women are more likely to have been furloughed and have their income reduced by to 80%, more likely to have lost their jobs. And if you think in the context of women, we're talking about the fact that, for example, lone parents, 80% of lone parents are women. So a loss of income or a loss of job is dramatically impactful. Women make up 69% of those on low pay earnings. And as Kate has quite rightly outlined, homeschooling, working from home, caring for parents has mostly fallen on women. And then we've got the childcare provider sector as well, a lifeline for women workers to be able to go out to work. Many childcare providers have gone bust, and with most of those providers actually being women, it's been double impact for us. Health workers, social care workers facing COVID risk have been left underpaid and overworked. The impacts on our rights at work, our job security and our incomes have been stark, and Black and Asian workers have been harder hit still. A TEC report published just at the beginning of this month, I think last Monday, highlighted that the unemployment rate amongst BME workers has risen at more than twice the speed of the unemployment rate for white workers. BME unemployment rates have increased by nearly 2/3 to 9.5%. From the end of 2019 to the end of 2020. Over the same period, the unemployment rates for white workers rose by just under 1/3 to 4.5%. And if we look at the unemployment rate for people like me, for Black, African and Caribbean workers, it has risen by 3 times the rate of white unemployment. So as Black women, we see that Black women are 1 in 10 of them are now unemployed. In this period of Black Lives Matter movement, Black lives have often felt disposable, used as cheap labour in vulnerable jobs and precarious jobs, bad working conditions, and as key workers without adequate PPE protections. As nurses, care workers, transport workers, retail staff, and other vital key workers, clapped and then ignored by the government, opposed to workers' rights and equality. The ONS data on disproportionate impacts on Black workers and communities has been largely ignored. Migrant workers are being left destitute and forced to take risks and work instead of self-isolating for fear of losing jobs and an income to survive. We must thank Black workers and activists who have come together with our brothers and sisters in the unions and have championed to highlight and raise demands for Black workers during this pandemic, such as BAEM, risk assessments for COVID, equality impact assessments as been mentioned, and also the call now for gender and ethnicity pay gap reporting and actions. Unite equality structures, I think as Jayne's kind of mentioned, and our equalities education enable women and Black members to develop in our union and to gain experience and skills to speak up and be heard. I've been on that training. I've been on Women's Week. I've been on lots of the equality and political training that Unite offers. And this has enabled me to network across the country with Unite women and Black activists. I'm proud to have gone to Women's Week and in Durham, and to go to the Durham Miners Gala in 2019, just before Asfana, a fellow colleague who was on the training with me, was elected. Asfana Begum was elected MP in 2019. So that was brilliant. During this pandemic, women have been organising in workplaces and communities. More women have been able to attend online meetings and access training. In my union branch, my Unite branch, we've acted during this pandemic. We've negotiated full pay for all staff during the pandemic, regardless of whether they can carry out their work at home. We've organised for Black workers to have we've got a new Black staff network, which is empowering new members to develop demands on race equality. we've negotiated a new pandemic-related special leave agreement, which has helped to release workers juggling childcare and other care responsibilities with no loss of pay. And we've ensured that equality impact assessments are being carried out to identify and avoid inequality exacerbating. This month we submitted, we're very proud actually, this month to have submitted our pay and equality claim. So we've not just put a pay claim in, we've made sure it's a pay and equality claim, and we're calling for fair pay rise, home working assistance, and gender and ethnicity pay gap reporting and actions in our workplace. During this pandemic, unable to deliver our humanitarian aid to refugees in Calais, BARAC-UK has organised support for families and women left destitute with no recourse to public funds by donating and providing food and essentials. This is just some of the work that women activists in Unite and elsewhere have been doing to organise and resist in this pandemic. But as we come out of this pandemic, we must ensure that our unions and our movements ensure that all women are engaged and involved and represented. And I'm talking all women, involving all women, Black women, disabled women, LGBT women, Black LGBT women, Black disabled women, LGBT disabled women. We don't fit into one box, you know, we're very diverse. We're diverse and often impacted by multiple oppressions. The pandemic has exposed and exacerbated existing inequalities, as I've highlighted some of those. And the government's response has left many of us out of the agenda. As a lifelong socialist and Black activist, I am proud to support our United Left candidate, Steve Turner, as our General Secretary candidate. Steve has proved himself a lifelong and committed socialist in the fight for a better future, both as Assistant General Secretary in Unite and also as the Chair of People's Assembly Against Austerity. Uniting together, we can make our demands heard. Together under Steve's leadership, we can organise, and collectively we will win a better future. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Donna. And I think everybody here at the meeting can see Donna's passion shining forth from her tremendous history of consistent action against inequalities in all its forms. So thanks very much, Donna, for that very thorough exposition. Thank you. Now we'll move on to our fourth speaker today, who is Sam Webster-Moore. She's the Unite Deputy Senior Steward at BMW Cowley, which is a big manufacturing plant, which, as you would imagine, is very male dominated. Sam is going to tell us how she battled to the forefront and what we need in our union for other women to be able to succeed in the same way. So over to you, Sam.
Good morning, sisters and brothers. Firstly, I've been in solidarity from the sisters and brothers from the South East 625 BMW branch. And thank you for the invitation to be here to celebrate International Women's Day, Choose to Challenge. My name is Sam Webster-Moore. I'm a senior rep and work within the paint shop within the mini car plant for just under 28 years. On my induction day, I was shown into a room where the convener and the deputy convener from the T&G spoke to us about the importance of the trade union within the workplace and the reasons why we should join. I did this without a second thought. I thought twice though, when on the same day I would notice a small band of women who started with me were all sent to the trim shop based on the assumption we could sew. From there on, I moved to the paint shop. A very male-dominated area, but it didn't bother me. I just got on with my job. A few remarks were made, but they were put in their place quite quickly. I then moved to a buy-off area within the paint. I was the lone woman. I started to question why I wasn't being asked to do the overtime and told by a male steward that I didn't have the skills. So you can safely say I chose to challenge. Back then, I was on the rota the following weekend. 15 years later, I needed my union support when I was dismissed following an incident at work. I was reinstated after appeals, etc., with the support of the convener, but had to move shifts and lost my lead associate role. I now had a warning. I started challenging back at work, and when I spoke to the male steward, he just said, "This is the way it is." After a year, fired, and had raised a lot of issues, and some we got changed. Small wins, but not bad for being a non-steward and a woman. I wasn't sure. Our steward left at that point. I found out that I was nominated to take over. I wasn't sure. I'd only just cleared my warning, and I didn't want to make any waves. But as I was told by another steward from another area, do it, you'll have the whole union behind you. There was a guy on my line who said he wasn't going to have a woman as a steward, so he put his name down. So that made my mind up. The count began. I saw his face as the pile of ballot papers were getting bigger. Then the count suddenly changed. In the end, I won. I couldn't believe it. I put my hand out to shake his, but he turned and left the office. It was a turning point for our shop and the plant. January 2010, I attended my first plant stewards meeting. 50 other stewards from across the plant. I saw one other female in that room, which wasn't a surprise. It was a really male-dominated workplace. But I had my brothers by my side for advice and guidance. I did my Unite training, stood my ground, and elected unopposed for a second time round. I've stood in the regional and national elections. I've sat on the Women's National Committee and currently Vice Chair of the National LGBT Committee and playing a bigger role within our union and the Unite family. I sat and listened to some truly inspirational women at the National Women's Committee, a strong body of women that had already done so much for the women in the workplace and in bigger society. Their struggles they face in the workplaces about equal pay, maternity, abortion rights, to name a few. Like all good trade unionists, after the meeting I was invited to join them for a lemonade. I continued to talk and I wanted to know more and more. I came back to work the following day with a fire inside that I never knew I had before. I finally knew what it meant about women empowering women. So fast forward to 2014, my senior rep was retiring, leaving an opening. After a meeting with the stewards on our shift, I was put forward to stand for the position of senior rep, which in turn gave me a seat on the plant joint committee for the trade union. The first female senior rep to ever have sat on this committee. 7 years on, I still hold the same position. A little older, certainly not greyer and wiser, but still there. This has allowed me to be part of a collective bargaining of the top table, which has to be a priority going forward for all our sisters within our union and further afield. It was also time for me to step down from the Women's Committee, as I was always been told to bring someone up behind you. And I know that there are two strong women from our plant, and it was their time. Both sit on the Regional Committee, the Women's Committee, and one of them now sits on the National Women's Committee. We all have a place in building women's activism, and if every one of us pulls up a sister behind us, just think how quicker we will get there. That is why, for the future of our union and the UL, whoever is a leader, I still believe that Steve is the best place to do that. Being on the PJC has allowed me to input the challenges, issues around women in the workplace, from workwear to the menopause policy, childcare issues, and all these using the information from Unite's bargaining briefs. Last June's Fighting for the Future of Manufacturing, but more recently the Manufacturing Matters briefs from our AGS for manufacturing Steve, who sends out, have become even more important within our manufacturing sector, and most recently a plan for jobs in the manufacturing of the UK. I would like to thank Steve on behalf of our members for the work he has put in the last year with the furlough. This has made a difference to our members, not only in my workplace, but along our manufacturing supply chain, and with the continued battle he has with the Tories. But for supporting the car industry, especially when some are seeing more suppressed customer demand for cars, telling the government without intervention, investment and support, it will be putting hundreds and thousands of skilled jobs at risk. It's taken a long time, but more and more women are working in manufacturing plants, like ours, and more are taking up leadership roles. We have seen more female apprentices coming through, and most of them are opting to go into the maintenance department more than ever before. The younger women coming behind us need to see progress and what it means for something. Our structures need to reflect the voice of women in the struggles ahead. We have been keeping the country going through this crisis, yet we are the most adversely impacted. We need empowered women at every level of the union. All sectors, we make up 30% of the membership now. This is no longer a man's world, but please remember, always look behind you, hold out your hand and bring that sister behind you. Together, stronger. Thank you, sisters and brothers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sam, for that. And I think it's really a useful, extremely useful illustration for our Women's Charter, which is coming up next. The way that Sam was empowered by Unite's equalities agenda to rise to the position that she now occupies and to be part of the collective bargaining unit for her plant, because that means all of the equalities agenda is right at the centre of all of the bargaining that takes place and the deals that are made on behalf of those workers at that plant. And that, of course, means that if the doors are far more opened wider for not, to employ a much wider and more diverse workforce in that plant, in those good, well-paid, skilled jobs. So I'll now move on to the Women's Charter that we have been, women on the left have been looking at and discussing over some period of time. I'm going to have to look at my notes, Leanne. I've got the Women's Charter, which is now up on your screens in front of you. So I'll take you through each point one by one. So the first point, I think, speaks for itself, and it's what we've been talking about through the whole of this meeting, which is having women as an integral part of a strong collective leadership in Unite. So I think that, as I say, I think that speaks for itself. We want to be very much part of a collective organisation, of our collective union, and we want our leadership also to be just as collective, so that it reflects the membership as closely as possible, and manifests all the equality strands in its makeup. We want to be sure that there is no assumption that the job of equalities is done once minimal proportionalities are achieved, because as all our Unite members on this call will know, we have rules about minimal representation of women, BAEM, disabled and so forth on our committees. But what the point being made here is that you can have more than a minimal proportionality. You could have your whole committee consisting of, for example, or not the whole committee, but 3/4 of the committee consisting of women. We are also asking that our equality reps, with full recognition, are engaged in the collective bargaining process, like, as Sam explained, that she was involved in the collective bargaining at BMW, raising all the key issues around equalities to ensure that the workforce is diverse and the representation is diverse in the workplace. And we added in that the phrase "with full recognition," because, as everyone will know, equality reps don't get facility time to carry out their absolutely crucial and essential work. And that alone shows us what kind of value successive Tory governments and Labour governments have placed on the importance and significance of equality, the role of equality reps. We're asking for equal pay audits and transparency surveys across all our sectors. So what we're asking for is for the Unite to conduct a systematic pay audits across all our sectors so we can see where the inequalities are. And we can, once we've mapped all of that, we can begin to mount campaigns and begin to address the flagrant injustice of the enormous pay gaps that still continue to exist to this day between the pay of men and women. And that exists across all the public sector, the private sector, all of our sectors we know has this enormous pay gap. We want flexible working legislation to reflect post-COVID-19 remote working, work-life balance, career breaks, job sharing, and the right to disconnect. And this is about the new way that the world of work appears post-lockdown and post-COVID, where there's been an enormous changeover, massive changeover from the compulsion to turn up and be there, presenteeism, physically there at the workplace. COVID has forced the shattering of this assumption, and it's in the workplace. People have discovered that there's an enormous amount of work that can be conducted online, huge amounts of work that can be conducted online. So what we're saying here is that the new world is looking at much more online working than previously and far less turning up to the workplace. But this has to be something that is a choice that's made by workers, and particularly women workers, because they need all kinds of flexible working practices in order to be able to balance all the responsibilities that sadly, because of institutional sexism, they still have, like caring responsibilities, working, domestic, women still carry out the bulk of domestic chores and the bulk of childcare, despite, the new world of both parents having to stay at home in many circumstances. So what this point is about is being able to negotiate the ways of working that accommodate women and make work life and home life equally easy for women, equally easy and equally accessible for women. And the right to disconnect is an extremely important aspect of that, because that simply means the way that the world of work has changed online means that you're on call all the time, day and night, and there's an enormous pressure. I know in my sector where I work, the voluntary sector, there's an enormous pressure to work unpaid overtime and unpaid weekends and so on and so forth. So women very much have to have that right to say, I work from this time to this time, and at that time I stop answering emails, I stop answering the phone, I stop typing things online, and I simply switch off and I'm doing something else. So the next point is a very important point that Jayne Taylor has already gone into very extensively, which is about a review of all Unite structures and activities through an equality impact assessment to see what the barriers are for women and to offer solutions that increase a far more diverse participation, and not just what barriers exist for women, but for all of the other equality strands as well. Because we really need to see, you know, does it depend on what time the meetings are, the branch meetings are? Is post-COVID, could we be looking at online meetings continuing, because that is easier for women because of childcare and other demands on their time? And I'm in the branch that I'm branch secretary of. What we're looking at is to alternate branch meetings so that we can have one face-to-face in a meeting place physically, and the next month we would have one that would be online, because what we have seen is that we've had a much greater participation in our branch meetings since we've had to hold them online because of the lockdown and because of COVID. So to be able to, you know, very systematically look at how our structures work. And for instance, I think it was Jayne who spoke about problems in the very precarious sectors, various precarious sectors, where there not only is there not even a proper workplace, but there's no recognition agreement, and women who are very much engaged in those sectors are not able to participate in conventional trade union organisation. So we're also asking for Unite agreements around the use of algorithms in recruitment and in the recruitment and selection process to ensure that there's no sexual bias. As we know, and we saw in the examination process last year, for example, algorithms are set up on the basis of the data that comes in from the existing world around the people who put this data into the system. So, and as we know already, in our existing world, we are surrounded by institutional prejudices, institutional biases, institutional sexism, racism, disableism, you name it. It's already inbuilt and enshrined, you know, in the absolute basis of all of our social structures. So if we put that kind of information into algorithms, which for instance say nobody with a Bangladeshi name has ever been an architect in this particular organisation, and the algorithm will therefore say, well, you know, downgrade the people with Bangladeshi names who apply to be an architect in this particular organisation, because they won't, you know, history tells us they will never become an architect. And so it simply reinforces, algorithms reinforce the existing prejudices and biases that already exist in society. So we need to make absolutely sure that we've checked through all of the, you know, the maths and the data and the systems that are being used, and we overturn it when it is biased and prejudiced. The next point is, I think, pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. We want safe workplaces free from harassment and violence. And the last point is the point that Jayne also elucidated in her contribution, which is working to build, as we must, the next generation of women to participate in all of our structures, to participate in our leadership, and to build a future for all of us, a left future, a socialist future for all of us. And just to make the final point at the end of this Charter for Women, we will not, the struggle that we're engaged in is an absolutely unprecedented struggle, and we're facing a concatenation of crises that are looming ahead of us. In not only the impact on the economy from COVID and from Brexit, we were already facing an impending slump prior to the outbreak of the pandemic, and we are looking at the impact of the climate catastrophe on the economy and on the whole world and on our whole future. And we will not win this fight, which is a fight for socialism above all, for the many and not the few. We cannot win it unless we have all of our members of our left, of our class on board with us. And that means it's got to be absolutely everybody from all of the equality strands. And I'd just like to finish up by saying that we are starting work on inviting women to come and join in our network. And I know that we've been posting into the chat all the contact details of the United Left. So the United Left email is posted in that chat. So I hope, Joanne, can you post it in again, the United Left email? So please contact us via that email address, and we will organise our network, and the Women's Charter is an ongoing piece of work, and we want you all to join us and so that we can come together and we can discuss and we can develop it further, because it's going to be absolutely essential as we move on into this future, that we have these kinds of rights, we have this equality, so that we can, not only can we have the absolute maximum number of women recruited into Unite, the maximum number of women recruited into the United Left, and the maximum number of women included in our profoundly and fundamentally collective leadership. Okay, thanks very much for listening to me for all that time. I will now move on to ask Steve Turner, our magnificent United Left candidate for General Secretary, to respond to all of the contributions that have been made to the exposition of the Women's Charter, and to tell us how he's going to take all our interests and all our demands forward. So Steve, if I could.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Bronwyn, and thanks to everyone working behind the scenes to make this a fantastic event. I've been inspired by all of it, so I just want to thank all of the speakers and thank you all actually for allowing me to join you on what is your day. I know it's Monday, but today the United Left have put on a fantastic event to share our experiences. I want to thank Jayne, Kate, Donna and Sam for sharing their experiences. Jayne, what a fantastic executive it was. Well done in the chair. You didn't just do yourself proud, you did our union proud, as always, of course. Kate, your role in Westminster, taking the voice of women, taking the voice of Unite, actually, and your life experiences into Westminster is incredibly important for all of us, not just for the equalities agenda, of course, but your politics, your class politics, and making sure that you're there representing the interests of ordinary working people, men and women, in that house. Donna, the fantastic work that you do. Thanks for all of the work you do with BARAC. Thanks for your contribution there, just exposing, the way in which disproportionately, not just the pandemic, but institutionalised racism in society has impacted on women and indeed Black women in particular. And then Sam, your personal experiences around your role at BMW and the fight that you've waged. You didn't sit down, you didn't sit at the back, you stood up and you marched to the front. And that's what we need to encourage more and more women to do. And absolutely, that's what my campaign is about for the leadership of this union. That's exactly what our union needs to do, to inspire and motivate and give confidence to more and more women to do exactly what you've done there in the auto industry. Zoom, 9 months ago, I'd never heard of Zoom, but what a fantastic platform it's become. I know there are others as well out there, but bringing together such a great group today. I'm pleased to see so many men actually on the call today. It's opened up an opportunity for more and more people to access the democracy in our union. And of course, to have discussions like this about really, really important issues. And the charter that Bronwyn's just outlined, what a fantastic starting point. I know it's an ongoing discussion inside the United Left, and I want to see more and more people participate in that, of course. I'm absolutely committed to that charter and whatever it is that you want to do to ensure that women play that role centre stage in our union at every level of our union. I am 150% committed to doing. So I want to see Zoom, actually somebody else, I can't remember what it was now, made the point about ensuring that we use this sort of technology to retain that access to our union for many women and others actually across our union that have not been able to participate in the traditional ways in which our union structure operates. And this has opened that up, and we should learn lessons from the pandemic and make sure that we do indeed continue to give this option for people to participate and play their full role in their union. So I'm really honoured to be able to have listened in to this debate. I have taken those copious notes, Jayne. I agree with where you are with the charter. I'm incredibly proud that it's the United Left that's taken this lead in developing a real positive programme of action for women and to transition our union, to change our union, to give you the opportunity, the voice, that collective ability to participate in our union that you've been demanding for far too long. We're not good listeners, and when we do listen, we haven't traditionally been the best at delivering on the demands that we're listening to. And that's not me. I'm a very proud member of the United Left. I've been in legacy unions as well for 39 years now. And I am very much committed to that collective leadership that you talk about. For too long, we've had decisions made at the centre and simply rolled out, or decisions made on sofas or in armchairs, rather than collectively engaging with our members in every walk of life to make sure that we fulfil our full potential as a union and releasing the talents of all of our members to play their full part. So a fantastic hour and a bit in terms of just this Zoom, but I look forward to many, many other opportunities to participate in this fantastic discussion. I'll come back to the charter in a second. I just wanted to say a few words about International Women's Day. I mean, everybody else has made comment. It is our opportunity to celebrate the role that women have played, the centre stage that women have taken historically in developing our movement, and indeed in fighting and securing that political and economic justice that still surrounds us today when we come to examining inequality in society. But we've made huge strides forward over the years, and we need to celebrate that. And the women have been centre stage in that fight for, as I said, economic and political justice, but equality and also civil and human rights across the world. And that vision of sort of trade union organisation and women being centre stage of it is very much about the sort of discussion that we're having today, and where we celebrate what our achievements, we also learn from our achievements, of course. And whether that's the Match Girls 133 years ago this year, whether it's the fantastic champions of equal pay amongst those sewing machinists at Ford, whether it's the women of Grunwick, the Asian women of Grunwick, those lions that stood proudly at the centre stage of our trade union movement in that struggle in West London there. Whether it's Greenham Common, we don't leave our trade unionism at the factory gate or the office door. Trade unionism for me is about class politics. It's about transitioning our society, transforming our society, and the role that women have played in those wider movements for change has been incredibly inspiring to me during the course of my life, whether it's the civil rights movement, the history of the suffragette movement and the fight for the vote, of course, that Kate so eloquently spoke about. You know, I always think from Eleanor Marx to Rosa Parks, we stand on the shoulders of so many powerful women in our history. And it's women that are at the front line right now, the front line for the fight for equal pay and, of course, human rights. But it's our conveners and our shop stewards like Sam there at BMW that are negotiating the deals right now in the middle of this pandemic, a pandemic that has put women at the fore. It has disproportionately impacted on those sectors where women tend to find themselves more congregated, whether that's in care and in health. More and more women have been forced into home working, of course, and their homes have become their workplaces. When did we ever agree for our homes to become our workplaces? And whilst it might be fine if you've got a large property somewhere and a separate study, if you're living in a flat and you've got a couple of kids and you haven't got an outside space, this has been incredibly challenging period for all of us. And the long-term impact of this on our mental health, on our physical health, actually, as well as our working environments and the way in which we organise as a union, has yet to be examined in full. But it's groups like the United Left that are going to be at the forefront of raising not just the challenges that we face, but finding the solutions to them. And the government, absolutely right. Kate raised it, others have raised it. There's been no equality impact assessment on the decisions that they've made. We've seen many, many employers refusing to furlough women. That TUC report out just a couple of weeks ago, identifying that 7 out of 10 women that had made applications for furlough for childcare purposes or for homeschooling have been denied it. There is no right to furlough. From the very beginnings of this scheme, we'd argued that it should be a worker's right to furlough, not an employer's gift. But of course, we didn't win that argument. We are confronted with a very right-wing Tory government right now. We won furlough, of course. Nobody let you believe that they just gave that to working people. We won that, and it was a collective effort to do that, but we didn't win it all, and we continue in those fights, of course. It is women that have been at the forefront of childcare responsibilities and homeschooling, as I've already said, and of course we've seen that spike in domestic violence, which is absolutely appalling and disgraceful in our society, and we need to do something more about that, including funding local government properly to enable women to feel safe and secure in leaving hostile environments and their partners to be able to go to a safe space. And the 10 years of austerity that we've seen now has cut that local authority budget to the core, really. And they're now, in so many cases, not even able to provide essential statutory services, let alone those services that are desperately needed out there. So it's women that have always been at the fore. It's women during this pandemic that have continued to drive our buses. It's been the women that have been caring for our sick. It's been women that have been the forefront of manufacturing our cars, like Sam, but also manufacturing our vaccines. It's been women that are at the forefront of fighting that fire and rehire, disgraceful tactics of many opportunistic employers out there. And it's women now leading the fight for that pay rise for public servants, the attack on the decency and the role that our National Health Service heroes have played during the course of the pandemic in the offer of a 1%, quite an insulting, condescending position that the government have taken about a 1% pay rise for our NHS COVID heroes. It's our women that are at the forefront of striking for justice right now and organising new groups of workers. It's our women that won the free period products, a first in Scotland, of course, a world first in Scotland, but it's our women that are championing that in workplaces and in civil society up and down the country. And it's women that have been at the forefront of the Me Too movement. Donna raised the point about women's role in Black Lives Matters. And it's women that are calling out the abusers of power around the world, and quite rightly so. And of course, it's women, young women in particular, but it's women at the forefront of that fight to clean and green our towns and cities to meet the challenges of the climate emergency. And so I'm incredibly proud of the role that we've played as a union, as a movement over many, many, many years, from the fight for the right to vote, right the way through to the fight now to live in a clean, green environment and to protect our environment for generations to come. And we need to see more women in positions of influence, all the points that have been made by our speakers, women conveners, women shop stewards, women officers in our union, making sure that where we've got our equality reps in place, they are absolutely recognised by our employers, ultimately, of course, recognised in law and given the same status as our shop stewards and our health and safety reps and our learning reps. It's women that we need at the negotiating table. It's making sure that equality proof in our claims and those offers is very much at the forefront of what we're doing as part of our industrial strategy and our industrial plan as a union. And our union needs to change if we're going to do that. And that's why I look to that charter that you've developed as being the starting point for that discussion about our structures, about making them more open and engaging and welcoming, and making sure that women and others within our union can participate in the democracy of our union. We come up against Rule 6 time and time again, whether it's our women, whether it's black members, whether it's our young members. We're not in positions very often of Rule 6 compliance, being shop stewards or being officers within our branch structure. And therefore, we're denied access. And many women work in sectors of the economy, of course, where the union movement, not just Unite, is completely underrepresented. And we need to think about how we reach out and organise properly. And this is difficult. Nothing in life's easy. It's not called a struggle because it's a stroll in the park. It's a struggle because it's bloody hard work, and it always has been really hard work. But don't tell me that it's impossible to do that, to organise in care, right across our public services, to organise in digital tech, in contract services, that meet the challenge of home working that's going to be with us for some time now. How do we give a collective voice to those that are sitting in isolation at home? How do we build our organisation? And of course, many of them are women. And I want to take that off to our community members, many of whom are women, again, at the forefront of that struggle in building campaigns, networks, mobilising people in our communities to face up to the challenges, the wider political, social and economic challenges that we face in society. So that there are huge opportunities out there for us. Nothing's impossible to do. And collectively, we will find the answers to this. And that's why the United, I've always, put my faith in a collective organisation, in a team. Nobody's got the answers to all of this. There's no one font of knowledge. And part of our history, of course, the problems with our history is we've got too many people that think that they are the font of all knowledge. But collectively, we have got the solutions to the challenges that we face. We just need to bring that team together and operate as a team. And that's very much what my programme is all about. We need to fight for that economic and political change. And if we're going to do that, then our campaign needs to widen. We need to support that new generation of women. Empowering women is actually about empowering us all. This is not just about reaching out to our women membership and our potential to grow our union amongst women in society. It's about lifting the stage for all of us. Lifting the stage for one group is lifting the stage for our class. And that's why this is so important for me, and why that charter, I go back to that charter, I find that inspiring. And I know that people will add into that. There'll be ongoing debates about that. But I'm very happy to commit right here and now to adopting that charter, not just as part of my campaign. This is not about sloganising. This is about finding very real practical solutions to genuine problems and putting in place a programme to change. And I'm not just going to adopt it. I want to work with you to deliver it in leadership of our union. And together we will do that, working as that team. As Bronwyn spoke about at the very start of this fantastic meeting, it is about building that collective leadership, that team. We choose to change, and I'm happy to celebrate International Women's Day on Monday, of course, and to be part of that change with you. So I'll end it there, Bronwyn, with a message of sort of solidarity and ongoing support, not just to our women here in the UK, but our champions across the world that are standing up for, political and social justice, for trade union rights, for women's rights, for equality, everywhere that we find that discrimination across our planet. Solidarity.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for that. And thanks very much for talking about the way that empowering women is empowering us all. and that it's lifting the stage for everyone. And I'm really glad and happy to hear you say that as part of our dialogue at this meeting that you're going to adopt the Charter and you're going to work with us on it. And I think that is so much the path forward for us in terms of what kind of collective leadership we need for the union, that we can collaborate, we can work together, we can dialogue, and we can make these changes in the union and through the union as our instrument, with the input from all of the aspects of the equality strands, that we can change the world through using that through our political and our industrial struggles. So thanks, Steve, for coming. I'm really happy, as I said, that you've taken it all on board and you're going to work with us on this program. And just to remind people at the meeting, we will be calling for a meeting of our Women's Network soon. So take a note of our United Left email address and email through to us if you want to be involved and engaged in that. And just to say, we are moving forward, we are winning the future, and we are all in Team Steve. And that is the leader who embodies the collective leadership that we need and want. He will be carrying that forward for us. So thank you, everybody. And I'll say goodbye and thanks for coming. Thanks, everybody.